So John Wall and Demarcus Cousins looked good in their preseason debut for the Rockets. John Wall, we'll start with him first. 13 points, 9 assists, and 5 rebounds in 19 minutes. The big thing was the burst. I mean, in the very first possession, he takes Kobe White off the dribble. He didn't just blow by him outright. Like, Kobe White still kind of kept with him, but then Wall was able to just kind of shuffle the ball around Kobe White's head and got that one. The most memorable one of the game for him was probably when he faked out Kobe White, when he was acting like he was going to use the screen and then just crossed over. And then the Bulls helped defenders. They tried to collapse, but Wall was fast enough to get by all of them. The other big one for me was the putback in transition, where Wall just kind of came out of nowhere to get it, and then he hit the floor and he bounced up really fast, and it was just a moment of like, oh wow, that looked like the real John Wall right there. He had a defensive play where the Bulls were on a bit of a fast break and he was able to get the ball like when it was a bounce pass. There was another transition play where he went up the floor pretty quickly. He missed the layup, but even so, just again, the burst and the speed off the dribble and just getting by guys in the open floor, it was all there for him. He had a few contested jump shots as well, looked pretty confident with those. He also had another one that resulted in a missed layup, but it was the same basic thing. It was getting by his guy, rejecting the screen, or maybe it was off of a screen, I don't remember exactly. And of course, there was the 9 assists, and I think we got a little bit of a glimpse into what Silas wants to run with this Rockets team. We did see, of course, quite a few John Wall boogie pick and pops. Demarcus's 3-ball looked really good, which we all kind of projected he was going to have right away. I mean, Boogie can be a real stretch 5, and he might have to lean on that a little bit more given the injuries. But even then, we did see one time early in this game where Boogie took it off the dribble, busted out a spin move on, I think it was Wendell Carter, and had a pretty graceful layup. But to get back to the Silas offense stuff, it was a lot of pick and rolls with John Wall with 5 out, basically, and there was a Daniel House corner 3. There were a couple times when Wall got inside, and then it was Eric Gordon open on the top of the key. I've mentioned the DeMarcus Cousins ones. It looked like a real basketball team that, I mean, I don't know how many wins I would project them to get off of this one game, but it just looked like a team that made a lot of sense. And now the obvious thing to think about is, well, what if James Harden commits to this? Now again, it's one game and it's like 19 minutes at the most from John Wall, but you have no reason but to be optimistic about what we saw, right? And so you just think, well, if Harden was on this team where Silas has already proven that he wants to run more screens, there were even some double screens where it's, 2 guys setting the pick basically, and Boogie got some open shots off of that. And then you throw PJ Tucker into the mix as well, and we can be optimistic that Eric Gordon is looking all right. Then how good could that team be? Could that team be the best offense in the league if Wall and Boogie are going to look as good as they did in this game with a committed James Harden? I think it can be. Now, defensively, we'd still have to see. I mean, the goal would be, 16th in defensive rating or so, and combine that with a great offense, and you can be a really good team. Without James Harden, I mean, maybe they could still be, could they be the 10th best offense if you replaced James Harden with, well, let's just think about it. I mean, if Ben Simmons is coming back, then that would actually be kind of awkward in terms of how you're going to get Simmons and Wall to fit, but you'd try to figure it out. If it was like a bunch of guys from the Nets, and then it's like John Wall and Karis LeVert and Boogie and Dinwiddie, and I guess Jared Allen would be there now. I guess there's a chance there would be too many guys to make the rotation work. Like maybe somebody would have to get their feelings hurt, but we would have to see. Ben Simmons would still be the best offer for Harden. The next thing to think about is, would Harden be convinced by anything that these Rockets do over the next couple of weeks, or does he just want out and that's that? I mean, even if that is the case, he still has to play. Like, you can't just sit out because you don't want to be there. I mean, that's just breach of contract. So they would either have to make up a BS injury for Harden, or he'd have to be out there. And even Harden at 75% would still make what we saw in this first game a lot better. And as I mentioned earlier, PJ Tucker wasn't playing in this game, and Christian Wood was out for this game as well. So, I mean, even if Harden's not there, there's a world in which potentially back to being really good, John Wall has a stretch center at all times who can do something off the dribble, along with a whole bunch of shooters, and Silas, who was apparently the real mind behind the Mavericks' best offense of all time last regular season. Hey, you know what, man? That could be a real team. Now we can talk about, well, is that team really going anywhere in terms of title contention, and the lack of draft picks would still be there, although granted, if Harden gets moved, they're going to get picks or they're going to get a young star player. And also, they've managed to get a couple of picks back in this offseason, like the Covington deal and that sort of thing. But that could be like a competent NBA team for a while. And they were kind of caught in a situation where the only team that would have taken Westbrook might have been the Wizards. So there was no way they were going to get out of that contract anyway. So if you're basically stuck with a $45 million point guard or whatever, then you might as well try to be good while he's on the team, while still maintaining your draft picks and try to make savvy moves for young guys, that sort of thing. Now, whether we trust the Houston front office to do all these things, I don't know. But for the sake of, like, if you're a Rockets fan and, you know, this whole thing with Harden, I imagine you're not feeling as awesome as you were about the team compared to 6 months ago or whatever. But at least you can be like, well, John Wall might be still good. Based on this game, he's still good. Boogie, based on this game, could be good. Christian Wood has room to improve. And you can just kind of ride it out with this team for a while, and depending on the return for Harden, that's great. If Harden wants to stay, then that's really great, and you would still have a chance to be a real playoff team in the West. And if things bounced your way, could that still be like a finals team if John Wall is back to being awesome John Wall? You'd probably have to make some other moves, and granted, they don't have too many draft picks, as I just mentioned, but it would perhaps open up that timeline. So yeah, the gist is basically, after this one game against the Bulls in the preseason, in which these two played less than 20 minutes, you can feel optimistic about this Rockets team. Now, am I suddenly predicting that they're a postseason team without Harden and this John Wall boogie thing? I mean, if you're saying without Harden, that means that they've acquired either a bunch of stuff or it's Ben Simmons, and maybe if it's Ben Simmons. But the West, probably not. But if you didn't want the Rockets to be horrible, then those chances are looking a little better than they were yesterday.